From the death of Robert Maxwell to the flight of Rudolf Hess, conspiracy theories are everywhere, but they are hardly ever subjected to the rigor of scientific testing. Conspiracies on Trial is subjecting some of the world's most enduring and intriguing conspiracy theories to a battery of scientific tests. In this episode, we put on trial one of the most explosive of all modern European conspiracy theories, the theory that the last Pope, John Paul I, was assassinated. On the 26th of August 1978, Cardinal Albino Luciani became Pope John Paul I, spiritual leader of nearly 1/5 of the world's population.
Habemus Papa, Cardinalem Luciani.
He was immediately dubbed the Smiling Pope. His modern, modest approach was welcomed across the world. But a papacy that started promisingly ended suddenly. After just 33 days in office, John Paul I was dead. The Vatican presented the Pope's death as a straightforward tragedy. It announced that he died of a massive heart attack. But questions were immediately asked. Pope John Paul I was thought to be in perfect health when he was elected. So wasn't there something suspicious about his sudden death? Why had the Vatican decided there would be no autopsy? Rumors began to run wild, fueled by the fact that the Vatican didn't get its story straight about the circumstances of the Pope's death. Before long, the first conspiracy theories emerged. Despite the Vatican's efforts to stifle these conspiracy theories, one has remained ingrained in the popular imagination. This is the theory that the Pope was poisoned by a group of churchmen and bankers who were terrified that he would investigate the Vatican's finances. There was no heart attack, say the theorists. The Pope was murdered. This is a conspiracy theory we are putting on trial. Paul Williams is a church historian who has written a number of books, including The Vatican Exposed. He worked for years as a consultant for the FBI.
I believe that the Pope was murdered. I believe that the Pope died because of an administration of digitalis. And I believe that he was murdered because reputations were at stake and fortunes could have been lost if he had proceeded as Pope. The cover-up began almost immediately. The Vatican Secretary of State called for an immediate embalming of the Pope's body without removing any of the blood. This rendered an autopsy almost impossible.
This conspiracy theory relies on three central pieces of evidence. First, the embalming or preservation of the Pope's body was done unnecessarily and suspiciously early. Second, contaminating the dead Pope's blood with embalming fluid was an effective way of masking the presence of a natural, though deadly compound known as digitalis. Third, the Vatican's account of the Pope's final day in office is full of inconsistencies and is unbelievable. A team of toxicologists, embalmers and pathologists will, through a series of rigorous scientific tests, put these claims on trial. First, the time the embalming started.
Italian law dictates that the embalming process cannot begin until 24 hours after a corpse or cadaver is discovered. When Pope Paul VI died several weeks before, his body was not embalmed until 24 hours after the death. That's Italian law that the Vatican adhered to. In this instance, the Vatican demanded that the body be embalmed immediately.
The Vatican's reason was that an early embalming would prevent the Pope's body putrefying in the heat of the Roman summer, while it lay in state for 4 days. According to Paul Williams, the Pope's body was being embalmed within 6 hours of it being found, in marked contrast to his predecessor, who only died 33 days earlier in that same hot summer. Was there a genuine risk that John Paul I's body would putrefy, or can we prove scientifically that no such risk existed? Was this a Vatican cover-up? Embalmer Terry Knight is conducting an experiment to find out how quickly a body would decompose in the conditions that existed in Rome in 1978.
What we've done is put this pig into a container so that we can control the temperature, which is done via this gadget here. We've got it set between 17 and 18 degrees so that our poor old love here will be in exactly the same temperature that was in Rome on that particular day when the Pope passed away.
We've reached the temperature of 17 to 18 degrees by averaging out the daytime and nighttime temperatures that were recorded in Rome in the days after the Pope's death.
Pigs do decompose at a similar rate to human beings because the musculature is similar to human being, as is the fat underneath and also the hair on the skin. So it closely resembles what would happen to a human being.
The container is sealed and the corpse is kept in a constant temperature overnight. Nature is left to take its course.
With the conditions in the Vatican, which in Rome during 1978 was quite hot and humid, I would expect bacteria growth to be quite rapid. Decomposition would start in the lower right quadrant of the body and then spread quite rapidly up through the soft tissue of the body.
Terry returns 30 hours after the pig's time of death. Taking into account the 6 hours the Pope's body lay undiscovered, this is the point the Vatican should have started embalming, according to Italian law. Will the pig have started to decay significantly, proving that the Vatican was justified in starting the embalming early?
Some of the areas that we would actually examine to find where decomposition had started would be under the abdomen, and there is no discernible sign of any decomposition commencing there. A little further up, and there appears to be no decomposition there.
There are no strong visual signs that decomposition is underway. So how long does Terry think we could delay the embalming process and still achieve a good result?
The length of time that we could leave this pig before we embalm, I would say that at least 2, 3, perhaps 4 more days, she would still look okay.
According to our findings, the Vatican embalmed the Pope's body well before it had to. In their haste, they swept aside both Italian law and the common codes of practice that exist in other countries.
Embalming in this country would be carried out normally, I suppose, within 4 days to a week. If there is some reason why there is an inquest, then it could take months.
In view of the suddenness of the Pope's death, many people thought the Vatican's actions were suspiciously hasty. Was this an attempt to ensure no proper autopsy could take place? Were they trying to hide something? And if so, what? Conspiracy theorists say they were trying to hide the presence of the poison digitalis in the Pope's blood. And to back up their claim, they cite a second crucial piece of evidence: the fact the Pope's body was embalmed without any of his blood being drained.
The effect of that was to destroy the integrity of the blood. If, in fact, the Pope had died by digitalis, that could not be discerned.
The conspiracy theorist's claim only makes sense if it can be found that embalming fluid does indeed disguise the presence of digitalis in blood. If digitalis can still be detected when blood is mixed with embalming fluid, a central tenet of the conspiracy theory falls down. Conspiracies on Trial have designed an experiment which will be carried out by toxicologist Professor David Holt.
The object of the experiment is to see whether, if we were given a post-mortem blood sample that contained digitalis but was contaminated by embalming fluid, whether we would still be able to measure the active drug, which is digoxin. Digitalis is a whole group of compounds that you get from foxglove plants. One of those things is digoxin, and that's the most likely compound that would have been administered in this conspiracy theory. Relatively little of the compound would be needed if you had access to the pure substance. As we have here, you notice it's just a white powder, and really quite a small amount of this white powder on the end of my spatula. That's around about 10 milligrams. In a susceptible person would be enough to kill them. So here we already have some blood with digoxin in it. I've measured out some of the blood into these 3 tubes, and I'm going to add embalming fluid to 2 of those. One of them will be 25% embalming fluid, and the other will actually be 90% embalming fluid. We'll mix those, and then we'll analyze those for digoxin. This is a machine that would have been available around about the late 70s and was one that was used for the measurement of digoxin.
After 45 minutes, the analysis is complete. In which samples has the machine detected the digitalis?
Well, as you know, we analysed 3 blood samples. The first one was a blood sample with digoxin added, and we've been able to detect the drug in the concentration we expected. The second sample was contaminated with about 25% embalming fluid, and that's given the same result, so it's not affected the result in any way. The third sample, you remember, had 90% embalming fluid, and indeed on this test we're not able to pick up any digoxin at all.
So in the sample made up of 90% embalming fluid, the presence of poison is indeed masked. However, when there's only 25% embalming fluid, it's easy to detect the poison using standard 1978 equipment. This is the important result. Terry Knight estimates that to embalm a corpse properly without bloating, you'd add about 20% embalming fluid. The Pope's body wasn't bloated, so there wasn't enough fluid in there to conceal poison. The conspiracy theory has a flaw. The claim that the mere presence of embalming fluid in blood would have hidden the poison is not true. Pathologist Dr. Nat Carey agrees with our result. His judgment is based on first-hand experience.
Embalming someone won't necessarily disguise poisons, and in fact I've been involved in a number of cases where we have been able to find the presence of a substance on toxicological analysis of tissues or of what remains of blood, including blood contaminated by embalming fluid, and we've still been able to detect the poison. So let me say to anyone considering poisoning someone, you can still be found out if someone's embalmed.
Conspiracies on Trial have investigated 2 aspects of the conspiracy theory surrounding the death of Pope John Paul I. Was the Vatican trying to cover up a murder? By showing that the Vatican officials could have waited 4 days before embalming the Pope's corpse, we have proved that the Vatican did indeed act with suspicious haste. But our second test disproved the claim that the Vatican would have hidden any poison in the Pope's blood by mixing it with embalming fluid. The verdict is still open. In part 2, we will examine the differing versions of what happened during the Pope's last night alive, the official version and the conspiracy theorist version. Does the evidence point to murder?